Chapter 11. Shauna picked up a magazine, a glossy, high-fashion journal with a picture of Sade in a slinky fishtail dress on the cover, and slotted it down the side of an already overfull box. She stepped back and surveyed the room. It was as empty as she could make it, whilst leaving provision to make tea or something simple to eat, or attend to her personal hygiene. Nobby had been convinced to transport her worldly goods, such as they were, to her new digs, which amounted to a bedsit about a quarter of a mile from her new place of work. She and Elaine had been referring to it as the flat, but being in a converted 4-bed house with shared toilet, kitchen and bathroom made it strikingly like the nurse's home, just with fewer neighbours. She looked at the rectangular, unfaded patches of painted wall where her pictures and posters had been, with their little sticky tack artefacts and painted over screws. She contemplated the 4 years she'd given to the hospital and the 6 boxes and 2 suitcases she'd got to show for it. She felt a tight sadness grip the place where her throat met her chest. She crossed to the window, looking out onto the open fields. She had what most people call a back room, which faced away from the hospital, meaning her view was uninterrupted almost all the way to the Luxton Road to the east of Carford. It occurred to her that when she'd surveyed her new flat, she'd not thought to look out the windows, which left her missing this vista before she'd even left. It was close to 12:30 in the afternoon, and she resolved to go down to the canteen for some lunch. Nobby wouldn't be by until after 3:30, since he was off on some day trip with the residents of one of the female elderly wards, and that was the optimal time to return, ensuring the routine preparations for tea didn't run late. She threw on a cardigan just in case, grabbed a bunch of keys from the windowsill, and headed out the door, locking it after her. She saw nobody in the hallways or on the stairs, and there were only 7 people in the canteen, 4 people at one table in a group and 3 individuals scattered randomly about the room. She knew them all to varying degrees. It was hard to live somewhere like this and not come across each other at some point. The group of 4 were students. Shauna had seen them arrive in the transport together, but didn't know their names, and she smiled at them as she rounded the end of their table en route to the counter. They acknowledged her with nods and smiles without ceasing their chatter, and she reached the stack of trays, selected the top one, and slid it along the counter shelf to the glass panels revealing today's fare. There was nobody to serve her, but she wasn't rushing, and turned around and leant against the counter to survey the other occupants of the room. Taff was off to her left, munching on what looked to be some sort of baguette. Taff was a porter whose real name she didn't know. She did, however, know that his surname was Welsh, which earned him his misleading nickname. Whatever was in the sandwich had his full attention, and she could vaguely hear little grunts of satisfaction as he ate. His back was to her, but it wasn't a stretch to imagine he was smiling to himself. 2 rows of tables away, and nearest customer to Shauna, was a middle-aged woman in dark blue nurse's uniform, a ward sister by the name of Karen, and Shauna caught her eye and mouthed, "You okay?" To which Karen waved briefly, smiled and gave her a thumbs up before forking up another mouthful of cottage pie. The last person there, sat by the end of the counter, was one of the kitchen assistants, whose name escaped her for the minute. He was obviously on a tea break, nursing a cup of coffee, and stared out the window like he was expecting someone.
"What can I get you, love?"
said a voice behind Shauna, and she wheeled to see Mary, the head cook, looking at her expectantly.
"The cottage pie any good, Mary?"
asked Shauna.
"Well, I made it myself," said Mary,
and then jutted her chin to gesture over Shauna's shoulder.
"And Karen's still alive?"
She chuckled lightly to herself. "Good enough for me, Mary." And Mary took that as a cue to start spooning food onto her plate. She topped off with gravy on request and handed over the plate before heading to the till at the end of the counter. As Shauna caught her up and pulled her purse out of her pocket, Mary said,
Nobby tells me you're moving out. Somewhere nice. It'll be strange not seeing you in here. How long have you been here now?
Shauna chose to answer the first question. "Oh, it's a Carford, Mary, not far." She produced a £5 note and passed it to Mary, who tapped in the price, and the till drawer slid open with a ping and a clatter of loose change.
Still working here, or is that finished too?
"I have a new job, you know, but I can't start for a bit, so I'll be working on. My notice ends around the 10th of April, but the new place will feel like a new start just the same."
Well, darling, I hope you enjoy it, and like I said, it'll be strange not seeing you. Be happy, sweetheart.
"You'll have to give me the recipe for this pie, you know."
Come back before you go, and I'll have it written down for you.
Mary beamed at Shauna, then moved off to get busy again. Shauna took a plate of pie along the counter, grabbing cutlery from a tray at the end, and took a table not far away. Dropping her handbag on a seat, she took the one next to it and settled to eat. Mary reappeared from the kitchen and called out to Shauna.
"Do you hear about this student that went missing?"
"Missing? What do you mean?"
Well, nobody's sure she's missing exactly. Name of Dahl or something. She missed the minibus, never turned up at the other end. Nobby says he waited and waited for her, but she didn't pitch up, so he left. It's happened before, and you know Nobby, he's not one for hanging around where there's a job to do. Someone told me she's not been seen since.
That all sounds a bit melodramatic, Mary. She probably slept in and then got a lift to Loxton from someone. She waved a fork in a circle. Wouldn't be the first time they'd not told anyone where they were going. Maybe she was getting her last bunk from one of the male tarts in this place. She smiled as she said it, but she knew it was pretty much true.
You know me, love. I love a good scandal, me.
No shortage of that round here, though. We don't have to make it up, Mary. She chuckled then, and Mary joined in before heading back into the kitchen. Just then, the tea break kitchen assistant passed closer than she'd expected, making her jump slightly. He stopped at the opposite side of Shauna's table, tray in hand, presumably on the way to the shelf trolley where a small blue sign invited people to leave them to be picked up for washing up. As Shauna watched, his eyes drifted down to scan his tray, like he was checking everything was still there. She never made it to Luxton, Shauna. I have that from someone who knows. Bit worrying, don't you think? He looked up from his search and tilted his head back slightly so he was looking vaguely down his nose at her. Shauna felt a little unnerved and made a show of looking at her plate before scooping up a forkful of cottage pie. She returned his stare then. You know me, obviously, but I'm having trouble remembering your name. I'm really sorry. That's okay. I wouldn't expect you to remember. It's Byron. I've only worked here for 4 years. He smiled mirthlessly, and Shauna wondered if he was being sarcastic or trying to make a joke. Well, Byron, not really that worrying since it's not the first time this sort of thing has happened. There's bound to be a simple explanation. Then, whilst holding his gaze despite her discomfort, sorry I couldn't remember you. There's a lot of people working here, you know. What did you say to earlier? Byron forged on towards the stack of used trays and said, I can't give away my sources, you know how it is. Again, not a trace of levity. Shauna watched his back as he walked to the door of the kitchen and disappeared. Her appetite seemed to have left with him, and she pushed around the food on her plate for a couple of minutes before deciding she didn't want it. Mary reappeared behind the counter and started to walk its length. Mary, called Shauna, I just realised I have to go. Can I have a sandwich to take out? Cheese and anything you like.
Course, love.
Mary retrieved a pre-packed cheese and pickle from behind the glass and walked towards the till. Shauna paid, thanked Mary and headed for the door, and as she turned to close it behind her, she caught sight of Byron standing at the kitchen entrance, idly drying a mug, his gaze steady on her, and the apparition of a grin just trying to crease the corners of his mouth. Marky was sitting in the armchair in his room, trying to win an argument with Elaine. As usual, he was equipped with the obligatory joint and a large mug of tea, and he had his head back resting on the back of the chair whilst he contemplated the ceiling. "So you're trying to tell me, a DJ, that UB40 aren't real reggae? Is that what you're saying?" "I think your grasp on facts is tenuous at best, Marky." "Well, I think I know a bit about music, to be honest." "I meant calling yourself a DJ is stretching things a bit. You're not exactly Jazzy Jeff, mate." Marky lifted his head then to look at Elaine and mimed an arrow to the chest. He made a gasping sound to match and said, "Oh, the dagger-like tongue of someone who thinks Def Leppard is a hard-of-hearing cat." He took a draw in his spliff and realised it had gone out. Then whilst he relit it, he said from the side of his mouth, "Next you'll be telling me ska isn't real reggae either." "Not sure what that rubbish is, honestly. Is it actually music?" She reached out a hand to him just as he inhaled a lungful, and he passed the joint to her. "Can't listen to you no more, and it's your turn to make a cuppa." And he held out his cup as well. As Elaine was levering herself up from Marky's bed where she'd been lounging for the last 40 or so minutes, there was a knock at the door. "Come!" shouted Marky, rather more loudly than he needed to. Then he coughed and repeated in a hoarse whisper, "Come!" The door swung inward and Shauna strode into the room. "Thought you must be here when you weren't in your room," she directed at Elaine. "Hello, Marky. It's nice to see you," mocked Marky in a faux West Indian accent. "That Byron in the canteen is damn weird if you ask me," she said to Elaine, ignoring Marky completely. "It gives me the creeps." "Did he do the leery looking down his nose thing?" asked Elaine. "You know what I mean," said Shauna. "And he said he knows this student girl is missing." "What student girl is that, babe?" said Elaine, and Marky's ears pricked up. Elaine laid out and assembled an additional hot drink for her friend, while Shauna recounted the tale of Darla missing the minibus and the exchange with Byron in the canteen. Then she passed a mug of steaming tea to Marky, and the girls took their cups to the bed to sit. "So, is it true, or is Byron just jumping up a story?" Elaine. "Byron makes up shit to make himself worth speaking to, in my opinion," said Marky. "You give me the fucking creeps, doll," said Shauna. "He also said someone had told him she'd disappeared. If we could find that out, who that was, at least we'd know if it's true or not." "Wait a sec. What's it got to do with us?" Marky took a loud slurp of his tea. "Why are you interested, Shauna? Did you work with her or something?" "No. Erica did. She was in long stay on the F side of the hospital. Same student said as that ginger boy. What was his name?" "Cahill," offered Elaine. "That's him, ginger and pasty. Definitely Cahill," chuckled Elaine. "Looked like he needed some time in the sun to go from blue to white, never mind tanned." "So, wouldn't that make him the sensible choice to ask? Can't actually believe I'm getting sucked into this bollocks," exclaimed Marky. The girls giggled in unison. "If it's important to you, Shauna, I'll ask Erica when I see her. She's bound to be at the club sometime this week. She pretty much always is." Elaine turned to Marky then. "You're not being sucked in, Marky. It's just a sign of how dull your life is. Something boring would be more interesting than being you. Dull, dull, dull." "It's nice that you sugarcoat your opinions to keep from hurting my feelings." Can't spend all afternoon listening to this double act of yours. I got a boss coming to pick me up soon. Gonna get back to my room and pack up the last of my worldly possessions," interrupted Shauna. "I'll come get you from the flat about 7 to come back over." "Tongue Cillian. Still okay to stay with you tonight?" "Unless you get a better offer, you mean?" "Not much hope of that. Can't bring myself to be interested much, you know. I don't like all the fuss." "Who knows what could happen when you least expect it, girl?" "Happy to help out," offered Marky. "Who knows, Marky? If you turn up smelling of something other than sweat and lamb's bread." "Oh well, worth a go," he smiled. Nobby stepped out of the van and sniffed the air. He smelled an afternoon helping out someone he liked. Heading into Carford, skiving in the monument before heading home. Nobody else had tasked him with another job, so assuming he got out of the gate before his boss found him something else to do, he was golden. He locked the van and headed up the stairwell in the nurse's home. He knew where Shauna lived. Despite being married, Nobby had been to 1 or 2 parties in this building, so he knew where Shauna lived. Oh, and he had a bit of a thing about her too, but don't tell the wife. He knocked on Shauna's door, and there was no answer, so he took himself to the end of the corridor and sat on the windowsill to look out over the car park. He figured if she was in the building, he would see her from here. Similarly, if she wasn't, she would most likely come in via the car park entrance, and he'd see her then too. 10 minutes passed, and he spotted her coming towards him from the other end of the hallway. She raised a hand in greeting, and Nobby reciprocated before pushing himself upright and walking towards her. He was closest and reached her door first, waited for her to unlock the door, and then without waiting to be invited, followed her in. Without looking at him, Shauna said, "I just need to throw these last bits into a box and I'll be done, Nobby." "I'll take these," said Nobby, in his inimitable fashion, not given to soliloquy. He picked up the 2 suitcases and headed out the door again. Shauna collected the kettle and 2 cups and put them in a carrier bag. She collected a half-full carton of milk from the sink, where it had sat in cold water since her fridge was disconnected. It took less than 20 minutes to pack her life into the van, and then they were off. Darla tapped out her rhythm on the leg of the chair she was tied to. She was a clever girl, and she couldn't call out because of the gag tied around her mouth. She knew a signal of some kind might help, but she didn't know any Morse code and figured nobody else likely to be close enough to hear would either. She settled on a pattern of taps, which was neither a code nor a facsimile of anything naturally occurring. 1 tap, wait. 2 taps, wait. 3 taps, then wait. And listen, and start again. She knew the chances of being heard, or better yet understood, were slim to none, but she had nothing to lose, so she tapped out her rhythm on the leg of the chair she was tied to.